Hello, welcome in everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. My name's Sonia from Celestial Astrology, and we're so pleased you're here with us today. We're going live. This is our first attempt, so we hope you bear with us if we've got technical difficulties. We're having some problems with an echo, so we're keeping ourselves muted while we're not speaking, which can cause a delay, and we're practicing doing that and getting the handovers nice and smooth. So yeah, if that affects the continuity of the conversation, we do apologise, and we're also sorry for being a little bit late. Again, we were just resolving some technical issues while we were trying to get online. So again, welcome, thank you, and I'm going to start introducing us and introducing what we're here for today. So my name's Sonia, I'm from Celestial Astrology, and we're each going to introduce ourselves and tell you a little bit about what we're doing here today. And hopefully Krista's going to bring up a slide for me to talk about what we're here to cover today, what our objectives are. And we're hoping to introduce Hellenistic astrology, which is what we're all studying. Astrologers, yeah, so we're hoping to showcase how rich Hellenistic astrology is and the different techniques that we use. And we've all prepared a little thing about how we've come to astrology and how we've moved through our studies in our own style and using different techniques as well. And we're hoping to demonstrate how transformative we found it in our own lives, and also how accurate it's been at those turning points that we've found. And we're also hoping to reach out to you as well and hope that you join us in our community. We're introducing our community of Ask AsteriSofiaKairos, which Krista's going to tell you some more about, which has our own unique perspective that we've come together with. So we're hoping that you find something if you're an astrology enthusiast or you're astrology curious. Hopefully you'll find something for you today. So I'll pass over to Krista.
Yeah, thanks for joining in and witnessing our adolescent live YouTube. We're figuring this out, and thanks for everybody just for jumping in. So basically what AsteriSofiaKairos, which we'll refer to it as Ask, we all met on in a school called Nightlight Astrology School. So it's a Hellenistic-based astrology school. And at the end of year one, which is the first full year of kind of understanding the basics of Hellenistic astrology, we just kind of started to be like, well, what's next? Like, we're in advanced courses and we're still astrologers even after a year of studying. And so it was just kind of this loose idea of wanting to stay connected together and lift each other up and pool our resources and see what other new explorations that we can kind of create together. And so we created this collective. It's basically what it is. We're all at different stages of our astrology, but we all kind of share similar just motivations for why we want to use astrology. And so we made this collective to have reasons to gather, have reasons to talk about the astrology weather, and share the specific journeys that we're on. And we all do client reading. We all have different specialties, but the loose net of Ask is just basically a collective of astrologers that is continuing to grow in our own individual ways. And we're doing these live events. We do things on the Sabbats, which are the eclipses and the solstices and the midpoints between those, as like kind of points to pause and just look at the weather ahead, the astrological weather ahead. And, it will change form as we change and we evolve. And that's the idea, is that it'll like ebb and flow with whatever we decide we want to do. Now, we do have other astrology friends outside of this group. And so we'll probably have more collaborators. It will shift theme and as the waves change and the weather changes. So this is just one form of it. It was an idea that Sonia came up with. And honestly, she did the bulk of the work to get this going. So thank you, Sonia, for doing that. That's a very long introduction to what Ask is, but there you go. So I'm going to pass it over to Shauna, and I'm going to share my screen again while you speak about yourself and your giveaway.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Shauna. I'm part of the Ask Collective. Sonia, thank you for doing all of the heavy lifting with this. It's kind of exciting to have this prepped and ready for Valentine's Day. We've all got our little red garb on, trying to get in the spirit at least a little bit. So I am, instead of an adolescent astrologer, I'm a baby astrologer. I went through the Nightlight first year course. I'm in the second year course. I'm in the year 3 counseling course. Really just love astrology through and through. The fun little giveaway that we're doing, first off, anyone who likes, subscribes to our newsletter, likes the YouTube channel is going to be, oh, I'm so sorry. Come here. Is going to, and books a reading with one of our astrologers is going to get a 25% discount. But in addition to that, the actual giveaway we're doing, I am going to be giving away a free mini reading. So again, you'll need to qualify for those things, and then we're going to draw for that reading on Valentine's Day. So stay tuned for that. Janessa, I'm going to hand it off to you so that you can introduce yourself and do a little bit more with this too.
Thanks, Shauna. So yeah, I'm Janessa. I am also an adolescent astrologer. I have been doing client readings now professionally for about 9 months-ish. So I still feel very new to the industry, but yeah, I've been studying hard. I'm in year 2 at the Nightlight program. And yeah, my astrology name that I go by on social media is By Jove Astro or By Jove Astrology. And you can find out more about what I offer at byjoveastrology.com. And then I just wanted to highlight that although we're a collective and we like to do things together, we each bring unique things to the table. And I wanted to kind of highlight those for each of us. So I'll start with Krista. Krista is, I like to call her our a walking library of symbols and esoteric wisdom. I don't even know how she has collected all of this knowledge that she has, but she's really great at like weaving in all of these different pieces and bits from like all these different myths and legends and like esoteric sources. So she's great at that. Shauna, I have next, and Shauna is our, I like to call Shauna our crystal professional or our crystal specialist. So she's done a really great job on some of our meetings so far of like highlighting different gems and crystals that we can work with. She's also really great at talking about the archetypes, and she's kind of found a little niche with the asteroids. So if you're into any of that stuff, Shauna is your girl. And then Sonia is really great. I think Sonia is really great with the details and looking at like the aspects and charts and finding little sneaky things with that. And she sticks with it. She doesn't gloss over anything. She finds she gets into the nitty-gritty, and she'll make sure that you hear all of the little parts of it that are important when you have a reading with her. And then myself, being the Jupiterian in the group, I think I bring more of like the big picture view. So maybe a little bit of the other end of the spectrum from what Sonia does, more like broad strokes or overarching themes with a heavy dose of optimism. So if that's what you're looking for, I might be the astrologer for you. All right. So I think, am I going to be the first to do the next part? I can't see the slides on my end, so I'm not sure if that's up.
Yeah. So if you want to go, I have your astrological journey slide up. Can everyone else see? Right now it's the infinity mirror, but when I switch over, can you see the slides? Okay, great.
Okay. I'm doing this blind, just FYI, so keep me on track if you need to. But I think I can remember. So my astrological journey has been more of a recent one. I have 4 dates, rough dates mapped out here, but know that there is a lot of backstory in front of that. I think, it's kind of hard probably for each of us to pick like a date that it started, or something like that. At least for me, you know, that you look back through your life and you kind of can see all these little bit of like hints or like weavings of things and themes. So it's hard to nail it down, I guess. But for me, like the big breakthrough when I went like all in with astrology was in June of 2022. So I had kind of been exploring with it. I think I had downloaded the Chani app earlier that year, like late April or May, kind of around the the eclipses. I think it was the first set of eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus, my 3rd and 9th house axis. So I was kind of getting into astrology, but I still had like this major um part of me that was like holding back and wasn't really sure if this was like a valid thing. I work like with data a lot in my day job, and I am like a fairly analytical person. I would also consider myself a spiritual person, but didn't have any defined real, or I was maybe starting to define a spiritual practice, but that was kind of new too. So a lot of like stuff happening in that realm. Anyway, I was listening to a podcast just trying to like explore more about astrology and like still weighing whether or not it was like if there was any weight to the science or the math or whatever behind it, the logic behind it. And I heard an interview with Richard Tarnas, and that just like blew my mind, because for those of you who don't know, he wrote a book called Cosmos and Psyche, where he tracks the movement of the outer planets in relation to world events. And just seeing that there was like all this data that correlated with the astrological movement of the planets, like literally blew my mind. So I immediately got that book from like on audiobook from my local library, started listening to that, and it was kind of like all downhill from there. So later, like very shortly later, I booked my first reading. I was trying to wait for like closer to my birthday, but which is in October, but I couldn't wait. I booked my first reading in August of 2022. And then before I could even wait like the couple weeks for my reading, I was like, okay, no, like the more I was studying on my own and like reading on my own, the more I was like, I need to sign up for Nightlight Astrology, and committed to the first year course with them. So yeah, that was like that was a major step, obviously, a big like monetary commitment and a big time commitment. But in the meantime, I was like, I think one of the first like applied type astrology books I was reading was Chani Nicholas's You Were Born for This, or yeah, and that was that was really cool, because I could see like I was starting to put the pieces together of how I could like read a birth chart. So other than that, I think I was doing a lot of like internet research, not just, you know, the meme sources, but like good sources like Adam Elenbaas's podcast, Nightlight Astrology podcast, and the Astrology podcast, and just learning everything I could. I think I've said it before, and I think I've heard Krista call or describe it this way, of like just inhaling astrological information. So it was just this very like quick, I don't even know, like absorbing of like everything I could find online and it like in books. And then that first year course started in November. I was already like trying to piece together all of this information. So I started practicing like really quickly on a lot of friends. Thankful to all of you if you're watching. Any of you who like struggled through any of that with me. But so I was definitely underqualified to like be doing readings, but also there was still like this idea of like the oracle speaking through you, which I think other people might get to here too, but where like astrology as a divinatory art, you know, it's not necessarily like me and all of my knowledge that can like delineate a chart and give you the information. Like, yes, there is a logic to it and there's a method. But really what I'm doing like is making space and holding space for this like third party, whether you want to call that God or the divine or spirit, you know, whatever this third party is, making space for that to come in and like answer questions that people have, or like to speak to what might be going on in a birth chart or what somebody might need to hear at that moment. So that was really cool because, like I said, I was very underqualified, but it was like it worked. So to my own surprise. So yes, thankful for all of you who let me practice with you. And then, you know, doing that more and more like started to build my confidence. Obviously being in class really helped to solidify a lot of things. There were probably some things I said in there that were like a little tinged with modern astrology or things I had picked up from the internet that might not be what I would say now, but for the most part, it was a really good way to be like integrating stuff as I was learning. And then I officially like came out in the public as an astrologer in April of 2023. So I, being a little bit new still to astrology, I definitely am not like an electional astrologer by any means. I did like a very rough election of like, oh, I'm ruled by Jupiter. It's my Jupiter return. And Jupiter, it was the Jupiter Kazemi that I made like my professional Instagram page. So I did that. And then I started up doing astrology readings at my local yoga studio. And that started just about, so that I started my Instagram like late April, I think it was April 24th. And then I started doing astrology readings on May 1st, May Day, Beltane, right? At the yoga studio. So that like kicked off my professional astrology career. Most of those still, even though I was like taking money for those, I was like donating the money to a cause. So that made me feel a little bit better about doing some of those first paid readings of where that can be a struggle where you might not feel like you can charge yet. So that might be an idea for someone. But yeah, I guess getting back to the astrology behind it, it was really driven, I felt like, by the eclipses in my 9th and 3rd house. I am a Pisces rising, so I'm a Libra sun, Scorpio moon, but I have a stellium in the 9th house with the moon, Mercury, Pluto, and Venus. And I don't have anything in the 3rd house, but that the 9th house is also where we like find astrology in the chart. It's the house that speaks to like higher education, to divination, to long distance travel, spirituality, religion. You can find some of those things in different areas of the chart too, but those are some of the main significations. So having the eclipses there felt like it just kind of did this warp speed of like learning a divinatory art. And it was just like activating like, you know, half of my birth chart by taking place there. So it was just felt like a very quick thing. And then I don't know if I'm taking up too much time, but sorry, lost my train of thought. But that's the gist of it. During this time, I had Saturn transiting my 12th house, so there was like a lot of introspection going on, a lot of like exploring of my subconscious, a lot of exploring like spirituality and like where that fits in my life. It kind of, for me, this all kind of coincided also with like a spiritual awakening. So, yeah, it was like I said, I kind of went from like being intrigued but skeptical to like being a professional astrologer, like all very quickly. So yeah, I think that's my story. I don't know if I am interested to see what others are going to do with like incorporating the astrology of their stories. So I think I can pass it along to the next.
Thank you, Janessa. Yeah, I think it speaks to like how each of us has just it's our own touch, it's our own fingerprint, it's our own signature, it's our own way of expressing the love of astrology. And so even like the style that you speak and like how you remember it, I think it really is telling. We had a class today and one of the people was asking a question and he was wearing 2 sets of glasses, and like that in itself was like how the teacher was like, you're literally wearing 2 lenses, so how are you viewing this in 2 different ways? And I just think that that's the funny part. Like astrology can just be comedic, if like the omen can just be physically what you're wearing when you're asking the questions. So thanks for sharing that. I think Sonia is up next in the queue. Is that work? And I'll share my slides again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janessa. I loved hearing that story. I included this because we only saw this yesterday, and it turns out that it applies to Janessa's timeline as well as my own. And I went back and checked my solar return for this year because that's the class that we were doing today. And go figure, I've got a Scorpio moon in my solar return. So it's just interesting how different techniques collide. So today you will see that at the last quarter moon, we've got a Scorpio moon again, a last quarter moon, lesson learned. So it's kind of the culmination of this journey. But the new moon setting intentions was the very start of my actual astrological journey. And I haven't actually done slides for this because we only found it yesterday, but you'll see the dates come up in my story. And the first quarter moon, August the 5th, that was when I was literally sitting my exam for my intermediate modern qualification. And it was also when I was designing my website. So it's very much a course correct. I could see what it was going to become, but it wasn't perfect yet. And that's because I found Hellenistic astrology. There was corrections needed. I was on the right track, but I wasn't on the exact right path. But I could see where I was going. I knew what I was going to become. And then this one was bugging me when I first saw it, because I was like, if at the end is keep an or an astrologer will tell you this date was important to you and you might not remember what happened. So I went back to my diary, May the 5th, what happened? And there was an entry in there that said that I spoke to Krista about possibly streaming or going live, and what could we do and what could that look like? How could we form that? And actually that was the seed that was planted. And although it didn't become anything at the time, and this is the nature of lunar eclipses, is that an event can happen that you actually at the time don't think is significant because we didn't take it and run with it at the time. But it was actually, because that was May, and I think it was actually when the course ended, and it was like August, September that we actually started forming Ask and actually making it into something and talking to everybody else and bringing it together into something. But that was when that first conversation happened, that fated event. And of course, that's led us here to yesterday. We did a promo, our first testing of the software, and actually going live, pressing that go live button that's so scary because you don't know what's going to happen on the other side of pressing that button. So it's like really interesting that this is AstrologyByCeleste, who's an astrologer on Instagram. So I need to shout out for her because she works very hard always giving these families. And these are like the larger stories of the moon cycles. And over, as you can see, a longer period from 2021 to 2024. So it's another way that we can look at the moon's cycles and how this Scorpio moon has evolved over these just 2 to 3 degrees and over a longer time. So that was literally my revelation yesterday, even though I've been working on this for like a week or two since we set the date, putting it all together, but I've added this in at the last moment. So Krista, if you'll move to the next slide, I'll go to what I've got for you. So this is an overarching story, my ninth house story, which Janessa mentioned as a house of astrology and a house where we come to our higher study. And again, this is something I realized while setting up this project, because I hadn't really of Pluto. So in 2008, Pluto entered Cap. My fifth was actually conjunct my natal Pluto. So Pluto and Saturn were in a conversation the whole of this time, and every time there was a significant date, Pluto and Saturn had their heads together. You know, they were up to something in my chart. And in 2008, I was in a balsamic phase in my progressed moon. No, I lie. Yes, no, I was in a progressed moon balsamic phase. And that is very much about surrender and release. And at that time, I was a patient. So I was having therapy, I was struggling, and I was being helped. And I'd come to the end of my therapy and they offered me this mindfulness, and I didn't know what it was. But, you know, I'll keep an open mind and I'll try anything. So I went along to this mindfulness course and it literally changed my life, because after years of therapy, I found something that literally empowered me. And that's a Pluto thing. It gave me a technique that I can use in my daily life rather than being dependent on going to a therapist who's going to sort out that week's problems for me. I had something that I can use every single day to help myself, which gives you so much more personal power. So from being a patient, as you can see in these dates, in 2016, I went on to certify as a coach, and I chose well-being as my niche because that's my interest, because I've had years of chronic illness, and that's why I was a patient. And then in 2022, I actually went for a course to become a therapeutic mindfulness coach, so that I can share that knowledge with others. And on the right here, I've got the astrology of those events. So in 2016, the progressed moon was at the first quarter. So like those first quarter moons in that moon phase family, the first quarter is the course correction phase, where you can see what it's going to become, but it isn't quite there yet. So again, I certified, but the coaching didn't take off. I wasn't well enough. I wasn't ready. So nothing really happened. But it's interesting also when I looked at the zodiacal releasing, and that is a technique that divides our life into chapters. Quite neatly, it seems. I hadn't realized until we did this project and I had specific dates that I've looked, and my zodiacal releasing pops up a lot. It's not a technique I've used yet in readings. We haven't studied it in class yet. But when I looked at the dates and what was going on, I'm sold now as to its accuracy, because I was in a peak period then of release from the house of my spirit ruler, which is Jupiter. And then in September 2022, when I studied therapeutic mindfulness, my nodes were squaring natal Jupiter, who's ruling that lot of spirit. So that lot of spirit is coming up a lot. And when I had a reading with another astrologer, Dan Waits, he was really emphasizing my lot of spirit, and how even though I've had the chronic illness, that lot of spirit, because it's in the fiery planets, Jupiter is a fiery planet, it's conjunct my natal sun, and how that spirit is going to keep bouncing back. So those nodes bring that fated element in. South node was on my natal Mars, which is in Scorpio. Again, that Scorpio moon is getting activated. And here we're moving on to my astrology story. So in December 2021, I did my first beginner's course, and I'd begun by working with the moon really for healing for myself, but also we'd had some really difficult family events that year, some really difficult losses that were bringing me to ask ancestral type questions. So I was looking for healing for my family as well as just myself. So I started looking at the moon, and I quickly realized I needed some basic astrology to be able to do this properly. So I just did this course. It was just a baby course, just a couple of weeks of like online at your own pace. But at that time, Pluto was in the conversation with my chart ruler, and he was exact on my MC. And the MC is the point of like your legacy, what you're seen for in the world. Pluto is the planet that is like your awakener, and also I like to think he empowers you. Sometimes he takes away what's old for you. So it was like a pulling away of my old self and a propelling forward, whether I liked it or not, into what I was becoming. And that's almost what I felt, because I was just going to do this little course and that was going to be it. But no, Pluto had other plans. So I've got this other astrology of Saturn in the conversation. He was transiting my 10th, which is my house of career, and he was co-present with Jupiter, and Jupiter was at 29 degrees, which is the anaretic degree. And again, Jupiter there was having a conversation with Saturn. Saturn is a slow moving planet, and he brings in the hard lessons. They're lessons that you have to work hard for, but also the details, like Janessa was saying, where I'm working at those details. I think it's because Saturn is ruling my 9th and my 10th. So the way that I study and the way that I present myself in my career is very Saturnian. With the details, they've got to be right, they've got to be exact. And you can see that maybe in the difference between the slides that we're presenting. And you'll see that with the other astrologers, how they're presenting their slides. And also at this time, I'm approaching the full moon phase. So this is telling me, this is seeing the fruit on the trees. Is like the analogy we like to use. If you plant the seed at the new moon, now we're starting to see what it's going to grow into. And again, another peak period, a level 3, which is a chapter. If level 1 is like a 30-year period, level 2 is like breaking down into like smaller periods of years, 2 or 3 years, and then level 3 is just 1 year within that. But again, Jupiter and Saturn are in the conversation. So if we move on, then we're looking at when I certified as an intermediate astrologer, and that was between March and August of 2022. And now we see Pluto is retrograding back, and he's approaching my MC, but he doesn't quite reach it. So he's, I don't know, decided I've done enough there, I've done the work, he doesn't need to go over it, maybe. And in my progressed lunar cycle, I've actually got a lunar return. So that's the closing of a 30-year cycle and the beginning of a new 30-year cycle. So it's almost like that's how I closed it out with my certification. And it's like, okay, you've done that, you've had a 30-year cycle. And it's interesting because that's how long I've been ill for. When I left my last job in the corporate world of insurance, and I've been ill and housebound and struggling to get better and struggling to return to work. And it's like I received this certification right at the end of that. And it's like, okay, now fly my pretty, you know, go off into the world of astrology. And I'm hoping that that means I can return to work and it will stick this time, because Pluto and Saturn are in the conversation. I'm in a new cycle. I can do things differently. I've learned from that past cycle. And the progressed sun was exact on my natal lot of fortune. So that's a different lot. That's a lunar lot, which is more to do with my body and fortune and more internal. So it's shining a light on those things for me. So it's showing how I've changed and internalized those changes as well. That's how it feels to me anyway. And those eclipses that year were in my 1st and 7th. So again, that's to do with the self, but also in how I relate to others. So I see it as I'm not relating as the ill person anymore. I'm coming out as an astrologer in the same way that Janessa spoke about coming out to the world as an astrologer. And it was in that August. And again, that August was that date of the course correction that I was coming out as the astrologer. My website went live and I started doing readings for friends and family. And again, we see a peak period, and that's level 2 and 3. So we're looking at the larger number of years, a bigger chapter. And if we go to the last slide, oh, I've got the transits here, and that's the transits for all of us, this is the date that we all started with Nightlight. So we'll probably return to that if that's okay, Krista, because that's in all of our stories. So I think the last point is this 18th of October, which was taking the exam and getting the results with Nightlight Astrology, my first certification as a Hellenistic astrologer, which I like to think is the completion of really finding who I am. This is the astrology that I love, that speaks to me. Adam said when he was promoting the course that he'll explain the why of astrology. And that was the absolute thing that decided, at the time I was looking at 2 or 3 different courses, but as soon as he said why, that was the one word that was like, this is the course that I need. I need to understand why. And you can see from all these reasons that, okay, I know why. So it was my Venus return. Venus is my chart ruler. The South Node of Mercury were my natal lot of fortune, and my progressed Sun. So the South Node is like a release. It's like, okay, I can let go of that past. Mercury is giving me that confidence. Mercury is also known as the ruler of astrology. And the progressed Sun is where we shine our light. The Sun is always that solar energy of shining forth, and it's part of our what's the word I'm looking for? Our progress in life, our path in life. So your progressed Sun and where it is showing you your, not quite your destiny, but your path forward. So the nodes were talking to my MC, but it was almost like when they're squaring, it can be a crisis mode. It creates tension, which I suppose it was, because it was an exam. Krista and I were both waiting for our results at the same time, and we were literally pacing and refreshing our emails as we waited for those results. So I'm hoping that was the tension of that. Pluto was squaring those nodes as well at the same time, so he was in on that fated conversation of the nodes. And the progressed full moon phase was within 5 degrees, which completed in May 2024. So I've yet to see what that's all about. So I'll be watching before. So I'm just Saturn was flowing forth from opposing my natal Sun. So maybe that was when I was taking the exam. There was that opposition, which again creates tension. But Saturn and the Sun, the hard lessons that I had to learn, the study that I put in, and my Sun of where I'm going, my path in life, were having that conversation. And they were saying, no, you're going to have to work hard for this, girl. You know, you're going to have to get your head down. You're going to have to study harder than you've ever have before. So I did. And the fact that his flowing forth shows these are the consequences, and thankfully it was a pass. And I was delighted to see this, because I didn't know this until I did the work, but my zodiac releasing, I was in a peak 1, 2, 3, and 4 when I received the certificate, which is just wonderful, because again, that's like the really longer chunks of years, the 30-year. So not only did I have a progressed lunar cycle, but I had this zodiac releasing completion of this large chapter in my life, and it confirms what I already knew in my heart, which is that Hellenistic astrology is my home. It's my place. It speaks to me, it calls to me, and it's like, yep, you've qualified, you're one of us. That's how it feels to me. It's like, yeah, this is it. This is the peak. You've qualified. So I love that. And I think I've just done a little recap of the themes that I found on the next slide. I've talked about that. So these were the recurring themes, that Saturn was important because he is the Lord of my 9th and 10th. And that might be different for you if you're looking at your own chart. Your Lord of the 9th and 10th might be important. That the position of my nodes was important. My nodal return was important. The progressed moon phase was important. They indicate hard turns in life. So it was important when I had that return. It was important when I had that first quarter phase. Jupiter, the Lord of my lot of spirit, was important. He gave me that energy to keep pushing. And Venus, as my chart ruler, was in on the conversation too. So it's like all these planets have met in a board meeting and me that little nudge along the way. And obviously the MC, as we learn in class, is a sensitive point. And finally, that those ZR peak periods really matter. You might not realize at the time, but pulling them together like this in a timeline really mattered. So I'm sorry if I've gone over time, but I will pass on to Krista.
Awesome. Thank you, Sonia. I also would like not to expose anything of your chart, but she has a Mercury ruled Venus, and I think that Mercury definitely shines with all those very specific details. So yeah, I'm going to stay unmuted, and hopefully that participates with what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen again. Let's go to the infinity mirror and then go here. So I have some broader strokes. So I have a very long astrology story. So I started reading about astrology when I was 15, 1995. And only recently I had a reading by Nick Dagan Best, who's one of my favorite astrologers out there. He noticed that it was a Mars return and I'm Mars ruled. So that was like one kind of new piece of the puzzle. And that's that's how I view astrology, is that, okay, we're not supposed to understand every single little thing, just like we should not remember every little thing we do in a day, but we can remember these bigger pieces or these small pieces that just have meaning, and it puts your whole story and your own myth into context of being maybe larger than you think it is. So in 95, I bought my first astrology book, and it was Linda Goodman's Sun Signs. It's actually this very copy here. I don't know if you can see it. Nice beat up. I don't really read it now. I've moved beyond it, but it's like my little talisman for just this seemingly insignificant thrift store purchase that I probably got for $0.25, introducing me into a world that led me down many a rabbit hole, lots of lily pads, lots of caves to find some pretty amazing things. And I definitely went through a modern kind of gauntlet. So most of my astrological life has been reading modern astrology. That's just because it was what was available. I mean, in the 1990s, there was this thing called Project Hindsight, and it was by the three Roberts, Robert Schmidt, Robert Hand, and I can't remember the last guy's name. Apologies to you, Bob. But they were translating ancient texts, and one of them, or definitely Schmidt, but they started to translate ancient astrological texts and kind of revealed to the English-speaking and the Western audience of these very old techniques that predated what we call modern astrology. So they started to unveil these puzzle pieces that we in the modern age really weren't exposed to. We just had little disparate bits of information. And so that was in the 90s, and that grew. And it continues to grow. Like, there's more translations, there's more revealing of text, there's more of a weaving of the story of Hellenistic astrology. But when that was happening, I was reading modern. And so I loved Liz Green. I would buy just whatever kind of came across, my eyes at bookstores. It was very casual. But I picked it up, and it was kind of like a secret study. I grew up in a very religious family, and so astrology was not something that was really ever talked about. I won't go into the three wise men and, the story of Christ and like how that has some pretty loud astrological significations. But just for my own personal rebellion and curiosity, that's kind of how I started. I just kind of secretly read about astrology through high school, in my 20s. I kind of roughly put the dates here. So, and in 2005, I really connected with my first astrology teacher. His name is Kelly Lee Phipps. And we just happened to work at a grocery store together. And he led the first courses that I ever took. It was actually on the nodes. And Kelly was an infectious, enthusiastic person. He loved astrology more than I think everyone on earth combined. He just had this giddy, optimistic, forward-thinking. Everybody is invited to discover their astrology, and he really lit a fire under me to dive into it more. And so I got a subscription to the Mountain Astrologer, and I read it, cover to cover every month. And I started to buy more and more books. I also started to consult with astrologers. So he gave me my first reading. It was a Saturn return reading in 2007. And there was a couple of other astrologers that were just kind of in my community that I met with. And I really just kind of learned from other people. And you can see it on my chart. I have a 7th house Taurus stellium and an 11th house Virgo stellium. And they talk to each other because they're both earth signs, so they trine each other. And that's kind of what has led my whole astrological journey is out of convenience of just meeting the right people, which feels a very 11th house. I have Jupiter in the 11th, who finds his joy there. And that's really what guided it. So I would get readings from people. I would just talk to people about astrology. It was very one-on-one. It wasn't the studious 9th house like Sonia and Janessa. It was really just casual and like anecdotal information. And I worked with it by reading books and such, but it was really just consulting with astrologers that I knew. Now, what started to shift is going through into my Uranus half return. So that happens, every planet has a synodic cycle, and synodic just means its relation to our star, the sun. It has like a certain number of years that it returns to the point it was when you were born, right? So the solar return obviously is like once a year. You have lunar returns every month, like the moon returns to the exact degree that you were born every month. And Uranus takes 84 years to return to the point it was when you were born. So when I entered my Uranus half return or opposition, Uranus entered Taurus in 2018. And around 2018, 2019, and I don't exactly remember the date, I started to become aware of Hellenistic astrology, just what the concept was and how it differentiated between modern. In my mind, astrology was just astrology, like it was astrology or it was Vedic astrology. Beyond that, I was just in the dark about it. And it started to grow, meaning I wasn't just being casual. I was kind of seeking it out more. I was going right to the astrology section in a bookstore to find things. I was talking to people about it. I was asking questions. And in 2020, I have a background in herbalism and medicine making anyway. I've done that forever. And so I started to create products, mostly oils, that I would make during times that there would be an auspicious time to kind of capture the moment. So like taking a photograph, you're kind of capturing the joy or the discomfort or whatever you're trying to capture in photography. I was trying to capture it in oils. Through corresponding herbs and aromatics. So I was like really kind of putting the cart before the horse. I started a business to do astrological oils, but the more I got into it, I'm really good at making the oils, but I wasn't as well informed of actually choosing the right elections. I knew very primarily what to do, but I felt like I had a huge vacancy in knowledge of respectfully choosing really great elections. And so I started to just completely dive into reading. And I looked at a lot of schools even then, but then felt like I learned so well one-on-one that I'm just going to learn. I'm going to, instead of investing in a school, I'm going to invest in reading. So I got a lot of readings in 2021. I would find astrologers that I liked. I would kind of follow them for a few weeks. I would watch their YouTubes or read their Substacks. I would ask them questions, and then I would book a reading with them. And I would just use my nativity or my natal chart as the point of learning. And so I would have a reading with them, and I would just ask them questions. I would see how they would interpret my chart as a way to start really understanding astrology through them. From that, I found Nightlight Astrology School. So one of my favorite astrologers, Jessica Irene, gave me a beautiful reading, and she is a Nightlight alumni. And so I asked her right before I started the school, kind of what she thought about it as like my final push to go into the school. So I have Jessica to thank for that. This is more of like the waxing phase of just my astrological exposure out in the world. So while it's been part of my own personal journey, sharing it has been kind of what has changed the most. So in September 2022, I started to like officially give readings. And as anybody that does readings for other people, you know, it's at first I was very scared to get things wrong. And so I would research so much. I would read and write out, I would type out pages and pages and pages. I would spend like 8 hours in preparation because I was very nervous about not providing enough or getting something wrong or not meeting expectations. And so just a broad apology to everyone that I read at that point of just like overloading you with information because I'm sure it was way too much. Janessa mentioned something about inhaling information. My phrase is wood chipping it. Like I would get like books and just wood chip them into my psyche just to try to get as much information as possible. But going out publicly and reading for people that I kind of knew outside of my like inner circle of best friends was definitely a branch out. I started the Nightlight course on November 12th as the chart that Sonia had put up. And that was an auspicious day just personally for me. Outside of astrology, it's just been a date that I have always been aware of, which is another story. But that was actually the tipping point of listening to Adam Elenbaas's podcast. He kept mentioning that year one starts November 12th, year one starts November 12th. And the fact that November 12th was already kind of this brand of a date in my heart, I just kept, it felt like he was speaking directly to me. It was almost like the podcast was like, Krista, it starts November 12th. Like, have you signed up yet? And very thankful for many reasons that I signed up. We all went through year one together, got certified, I think the same day or around the same day that Sonia did. A year later, within that, though, I was definitely feeling more confident in how to read for other people. And that's really where my love for astrology is. I say it to myself and out loud a lot of times. My favorite thing about astrology is actually other astrologers. I love hearing astrology stories. I love meeting astrologers. I like talking to people that think in corresponding languages. So herbalism is similar. There's the doctrine of signatures where you'll see a plant that kind of is expressing itself in ways that are not necessarily verbal, because plants don't particularly speak English to you, but plants communicate. And I think that planets communicate in their own particular way through people with their own particular style. Robert Zoller, thank you, Shauna, for doing that. Sorry, Rob. So 2022 to now has been a very kind of diamond forging amount of energy of astrology. I kind of came out of my astrology cocoon to everyone that knows me, including the religious family that maybe doesn't necessarily approve of it. I don't really bring it up or talk about it too much because I don't want to make them uncomfortable. But that's kind of where I'm at now. And so for 2024, it's just a continuation of that. I love doing one-on-one client readings because I love the anecdotal stories. I love meeting people that are interested in talking about their own archetypal myths that they are expressing in their lives. Like Janessa said, it's looking at the symbols of your life. It's talking with an oracle, and that third party that goes in. I think about this a lot. How is it like God coming in and speaking through, or is it, as an astrologer before reading, like I sit and I just try to like settle, and I try to kind of empty enough of myself, the right parts of myself, to just let them go so that I have a little bit of space to invite whatever wants to come through in the reading. And sometimes that doesn't have to be a third party. It doesn't have to be a spirit or an oracle or the deities or God or whatever. sometimes it's just the space. And when you meet someone with that, if I meet a client and I've created a little bit of space, the space itself can become alchemical. And the client is coming to talk about whatever is going on with their life. And if I've created enough space to kind of invite it into me and have it mix with my alchemy, I don't know. I just feel like it's a way of approaching each other as humans and as spirits and as souls, with that meditative stillness, to find like a mutual corresponding conversation. And that's how I approach astrology. I have the tools now to be able to look at a chart and to say, well, according to my training and how I've seen it show up, there's different houses in a chart, and different houses in a chart can speak to a topic of life. Topos, the houses, the topics. So the entire life can be read in the chart just through the houses. And then we look at the planets and what they correspond and relate to. And you can just talk about it that way. And the client might say, I'm having trouble with this area of my life. So you can use timing techniques and predictive techniques to say, well, these are the transits that are happening. So maybe you'll see some shift, or maybe there is a crisis point, like Sonia said in the eclipse story. I mean, there's so many ways that you can approach it. And if you come to it with the eagerness and the humility of just wanting to find clear, kind of compassionately imbued solution, or just, again, holding the space for it, I just think that astrology doesn't have to be this woo, I just don't want to accept responsibility for my life choices. It can be a place of compassionately understanding your own situation and having also a functional tool to make choices in the future. Or sometimes it's just nice to be seen. We love to be seen, whether you're shy or not. You want to be witnessed in some way, and astrology is a great way to have it be witnessed back to you. So that's my journey. I'm gonna stop share, and I think that I'm going to pass it on to to Shauna. That work? Okay, I'm going to mute myself so I don't create the echo, because I was the culprit last time.
Well, I have, once Krista gets that slide up there, I have a much more sporadic journey, I think. I just labeled it my witchy timeline. While I mentioned before that I'm a little bit more of a baby astrologer, at least I feel, compared to my cohorts here, I started thinking about the timeline and when these things started appearing for me. And it was really a spur of the moment thing, which we'll get to there in the timeline. But the very first picture, it's a Ouija board. I was 11 years old, and I asked for a Ouija board for Christmas. Not sure who really does that, but I did. It was purchased and hidden in our basement and never given to me. So when I get one someday, I'll get to experience that a little bit more. Not having that has not stopped me from having plenty of spiritual incidences. I do feel like I'm a spiritual person. I don't follow one religion, but I'm highly interested in the workings of religion, and I love talking about it with people. And I think astrology really falls into that as well. So it seems very natural to fall into this too. The second photograph is just a picture of some tarot cards. I think it was around November 2001. I had my first tarot reading. It was with my future husband, my future mother-in-law, and it just shook my world. It was incredible and amazing, and I think it was within a month's time that I had purchased my own and started trying to learn that. And then I spent most of a decade in Borders. I think I kept them open. I spent a lot of time and money and energy there, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything. Between bookstores, my own little library that I've created that I'm sitting next to, and libraries, that's how I spend a lot of my time. I can't get enough. But I do find it hard to read a book cover to cover anymore if it's not fiction. So I use them very cookbook style. in a sense, whatever the thought of the moment is. If we go to June of 2010, that's when I had my child. I was looking at the transits for that, and yes, it's kind of just laying her chart on my chart. But the chart I have pictured here is actually when I went into labor. I put that on my witchy timeline because I do think that's probably one of the most miraculous things you can do, housing a human and then, maintaining a single person while having another is pretty incredible. And luckily, so many people who don't get to actually experience that moment of childbirth still get to participate in fostering motherhood within friendship circles, within family circles. And I know that I've experienced that the other way in our particular group here. I consider them very, very close friends, and I think we all offer each other a very open and thoughtful and familial and motherly kind of space. So I appreciate you girls very much. The reason I added the transit chart to that is because if we're looking at zodiacal releasing, which I've noted on each one of the pictures, well, at least the first two, for zodiacal releasing, when my child was born, it was a Capricorn year, so heavily serious, building foundations. I thought that was kind of fun. L2 and L3 were both Scorpio. That's my fifth house. I'm not sure that it could be a more perfect timing and release, especially since she was due about 5 weeks later. And then the L4 space was Cancerial, which just kind of makes sense to me. If we move on to July of 21, I lovingly say I met my first crystal dealer. Again, I was in a ZR space of fourth house perfection year, but a ZR space of L1 and L2 and L3 in Aquarius. For me, that's my 8th house, and that opened up a whole new situation. I do love my sparkly rocks, as Janessa mentioned before. Then we make it up to the Nightlight class. It was a very spur of the moment thing. I was getting more and more into reading about astrology. I think I bought my first astrology book probably at Borders, and probably somewhere around age 18, 19. But I can't pinpoint that exactly. It's just always been on the radar. I remember going grocery shopping once, and I got myself a little Cancer keychain. And I didn't understand, because I think I was maybe 10, what the word tenacious meant. So I had to go home and find that out very quickly. The Nightlight class, I did a very spur of the moment. I heard he had tuition assistance and the Kickstarter was going, and I thought, oh crap, it's now or never, so I'm doing it. And thankfully I did, because I met this group and I've had some really amazing classmates. That takes us up to Ask. So we think we figured it out. It was September, a few months back, when we decided to go ahead and move forward with our small collective here, and invite others in and start talking about our own experiences and our own futures with astrology, and start opening up our own calendars to other people so that we can make those connections. Because I think that for me has been the most amazing part of it, is witnessing others and helping them feel as seen as I have while working through my own natal placements. So it's been pretty great. That about wraps up my story. If anyone in the comments wants to add any of their own interesting timelines as they're thinking of things, please feel free to do so. Okay.
Shauna, did you want me to show the other slides, the natal promise and the secondary progressions?
So the other two, sorry about the echo. I put them together just in case we started with some more conversation here as we're talking about the different timing techniques and things too.
Awesome. Well, that was a lot, but we could have each talked for hours. And so at this point, Are we going to talk just about kind of a synopsis of our turning points and transformations? How is everybody doing on time? Do you want to check in on that? And yeah, apologies, Robert Zoller. I just really could not think of your name.
Yeah, I think we're good on time. We're okay to, we can go quickly through the turning points because we've already covered the astrology of it. So yeah. Janessa,
Who wants to go first?
Janessa, how do you feel your
I guess I'm unsure. Does someone else want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I feel my turning point was signing up for Nightlight, really. I mean, I've already taken you through the astrology of that, but I think that was when that's sort of like last quarter. No, it was the course correct, the first quarter. The getting myself on the right path. I was going in the right direction, but I had to get on the right path. And I think that was the moment when I found my path. I was in the right forest. I just had to find that right path, that right turning, and I think that was when I found it. Shall I go to Krista?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of the most accelerated shift was definitely joining up on Nightlight. And so then I look at, okay, well, what happened then? That was the eclipse in my 1st and 7th houses. And the eclipses were in Mars and Venus temples, right? So Mars traditionally rules Scorpio, Venus rules Taurus, and I'm Mars ruled. And Mars is in my 11th house. And so, of course, like the 11th house is like networks and connections. And I feel like I've found an astrological community, which I never had before. I had disparate astrologers that I knew. But then in the 7th house, my 7th house is ruled by Venus. I have a Taurus stellium there. And my Venus is in Cancer in the 9th house, which is kind of colloquially the astrology house. So it was nice to kind of see it all tie in, but the real shift. So eclipses can be great beginnings, great endings. For me, it felt like even though it took me 42 years of my life to get to that point, that was the point where things started to really begin in a real tangible way. And of course, there's lots of stages to that point. But I was kind of scared of the eclipses in my 1st and 7th house. And this is a lesson to maybe not approach astrology with fear, because astrology doesn't make things happen. It just reflects that things are happening. And so it wasn't like I was becoming aware of astrology and then that was going to cause some sort of great monumental shift in my life. I'm so thankful that there's been a monumental shift in my life, and then I have the astrology to kind of translate what that means. So for me, it was the Scorpio Taurus eclipses in my 1st and 7th that influenced the majority of my chart. I mean, pretty much every planet on my chart kind of defers back to Venus. And so, yeah, that was mine. Janessa, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I talked a little bit about the eclipses being really important. But there was definitely some stuff like last spring with like the Pluto into Aquarius. So my sun is at like 28 degrees and 52 minutes of Libra, and then my moon is at 0 degrees Scorpio. So it was getting the square from Pluto for a long, my sun was getting the square from Pluto for a long time. And then as soon as it shifted into Aquarius, it was getting the square to my moon. And then at the same time we had Jupiter was still in Aries, but Uranus is going through Taurus, and that was opposing all of my 9th house stellium as well, like at the same time. So like my natal Venus, natal Mercury, Pluto, and moon. And it just felt like this shift within me of like becoming alive, like life kind of just becoming technicolor, or like, I mean, that was kind of happening with like a spiritual awakening, but like I I really felt it. I know Elenbaas, our teacher, did a podcast during that time that was like talking about Bob Dylan's Going Electric. And that episode like just has stuck with me. Obviously, I'm still talking about it from like a year ago, but that really described, I felt like, how I felt. And going out publicly as an astrologer and like really putting myself out there. And you know, I'm an 8th house sun. I don't really like always like to be in the public eye. Scorpio moon, it's like I would rather kind of be in the background, or I'm like, you know, a little bit uncomfortable with like having information out there about me and in general, but then to like have it be that I'm an astrologer. It's something that is like not well understood by most of society. That was a big deal for me. So I definitely felt like I'm glowing in the fucking dark, like when I'm doing it. So yeah, I don't know if Shauna has a story she wants to share with us next.
Like I mentioned before, it was definitely that now or never kind of moment when I was listening to Adam on that one podcast. But as you're talking about things, I'm just kind of laughing at myself, because when we're talking about expected or planetary placements, people being a certain way, I'm Cancer rising, Cancer sun, first house. You would think that I'm a very warm mom kind of person, and yeah, I know I mentioned being a mom before, but throughout this whole thing, I'm talking with my hands. I can't stop fidgeting. I'm just highly mercurial, and I'm just kind of laughing about that. Does that have anything to do with the turning point? No, because that's what I do. But my biggest aha was that now or never. And then Krista mentioned, you know, November 12th being a very important date for some other reasons. It kept recurring for her. That just always happens. November 12th was my best friend's birthday too. So just those repeating numbers, those repeating dates, repeating themes, initials even. It's just really funny that way. But yeah, I think Adam's one podcast where he said Kickstarter, and if you need some help, genuinely need some help, email us. So that was it. Sonia, did you have something you want to share too?
Yeah, I've shared, but I'm just making me think with what you're saying, how astrology is a language of symbols and divination as well. And you know, from what you're saying, it's bringing everything in. You know, it's not just one thing. So it's just nice that you're mentioning that you know, these dates are important. You know, whatever's significant. If you come to a reading, be open, bring everything. You know, don't people apologize for saying this might not be important, but you know, no, everything's important. You know, bring all those symbols that are important to you that recur in your life, because you know they can show up in the chart. That gives us information and helps us to read the symbols for you. You know, we're the translators. We're the, you know, the middleman between the divine speaking through your chart. So it really helps us, you know, in that way that you're speaking, Shauna. It's we all work differently, but the charts open up and speak, and the more we know, the more we get that interpretation, and the chart lights up and starts speaking, doesn't it? When you can get to that moment, it's like the year 3 class that we're learning about the counseling skills, but it's not counseling as in active listening and the traditional way of learning it. Is about getting the soul to speak through the chart as well. And that's been quite a beautiful thing to learn. So I think if does anybody have anything else to add?
No, except that we keep talking about Adam. So I feel like we should just like officially say, like, if you're thinking about doing an astrology school, it's not just Adam, but the whole team at Nightlight. They have like a really great program, obviously, because it's inspiring. It is like functional. They give you tons of tools. There's tons of study. There are a lot of astrology schools out there. And I know Chris Brennan has a self-guided course. I hear a lot of people say that, but just like hands down to the entire team at Nightlight, because they just do a really good job. And I feel like they honor Hellenistic study in a way that I haven't seen reflected by other schools. I'm sure they're out there, but this is just a testament to how well we're still inspired to just stay at this school. So we keep like referring to him, not like we're just like stans of Adam, but we just like, he's just kind of like been so helpful individually for each of us. But it's the entire team at Nightlight. It's Delia, it's Michelle, it's Saffron. I mean, it's just, I really would not be able to encourage anybody, if you needed a sign that you wanted to start an astrology course, like here's your sign to look at Nightlight School. We don't get commission on referring you, just FYI, but I just, my soul is very thankful for the sisterhood and the community that I found through the school, on top of just having like a really great foundational study for Hellenistic. And from that, I think that we are going to look at Q&A, or maybe even look at the chart that was submitted. Is that right? I can pull that chart up if that works, Sonia.
Yeah, I've been looking at the chat. I don't think we've had any questions. I do apologise to Caroline because she's been struggling with the laggy internet. And I think we've seen that as well. Some of us have frozen at various times. So I do apologise to anybody watching or watching the replay, which will be posted, but no doubt that will show up as well. But I don't see any questions in the chat. So if you do have questions, do post them and we'll try and get to them. But without questions, we do have a chart that's been pre-submitted that I will pull up. And if the individual, we've got the name as Flora. If she's with us, we can invite her on as a guest. So I'm going to try and share my screen. Bear with me as I try and do that, because this was a bit of a challenge before, wasn't it? Right, do you see that?
Not yet.
Yeah, okay.
And I've heard from her that she's watching the video, but she's not as a guest. So
Okay.
The question that we had basically was just to look at career and money. So just with those two prompts, we can look at her nativity. And if you're having issue pulling it up, I can pull it up on a separate tab.
Doesn't seem. Can you see that?
No, I just see S4.
No, it's not connecting again. I'm doing exactly as we did in the trial run, but no, if you have it.
Sure, yeah, I'll pull it up real quick.
We have backup plans.
I know this is like an error, but I love infinity mirrors. Okay, so this is, can everyone see this? Let me close that gross ad. Can you see this chart? That work? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
We can see it.
All right. So we have this chart here, and I guess I'll speak for a few minutes about what I see, and then I'm going to mute. And so I'm not going back and forth if the rest of you want to come in and out. We're looking at, and we're going to do this, and then we're going to talk about just a very basic concept in Hellenistic astrology called sect. And that's if it's a day chart or night chart. It's a really easy way to kind of introduce into astrology. And so this is a day chart, because this line here that splits the chart in half on a horizontal way, it puts the sun above that line. So very basically that makes it a day chart. So we're looking at the sun as the sect ruler, and the sun rules the 10th house of career. And so that's a real basic way just to kind of like enter into an astrology chart. So the sun ruling the 10th house of career will be informed by the themes of the house that the sun resides in, right? So the sun is in the 8th house, which is kind of, it's got like a spooky lore about it because it's one of the dark houses. But the 8th house is really a house of being bound by other people's debts or other karma. It's not just you independently on your own. It's like your relationship with other things. And so having that 8th house themed sun ruled by Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini, informs this house of career. So I would wonder, okay, well, the career, is it driven by spawning by other people's money somehow? Is it kind of encouraged by mercurial themes? The midheaven or the legacy or how this person is seen is right there smack in the middle of the 10th house. And then Mars, as the only planet that's in this 10th house of career, happens to be the malefic contrary to sect, which is a phrase meaning that malefics are the planets that kind of say no to things. They're not always viewed as the most helpful in the moment. They're not bad by nature, but they often appear like they create the most difficulty in a planet or in a chart. So I would look at this and say, okay, well, there's things that the native or the person's chart that we're looking at has to overcome, because that's the nature of Mars, is to overcome. The aspect that's related to Mars is the square. And it's just like what you have to overcome to kind of get to this. So I would say that this person probably has to overcome things to kind of further in their career. And it's having that, the irony of being Scorpio rising, because typically Scorpio risings like to kind of be cloaked and not seen. They like to be the ninja, the spy. To have the sun ruling their 10th like shines light, and maybe shining all that light creates more shadows for the Scorpio rising to hide in. But it's also like the irony of Leo being at the very top just never ceases to amaze me. Yeah, that's, I'll start there and then I'll go on mute if someone else wants to chime in. That's the career. If somebody wants to speak maybe to the 2nd house there, I'll turn over and mute myself.
I was drawn to looking at the moon and Jupiter because we've got a lovely Jupiter there that's domiciled in Pisces and ruling the 5th house, which indicates creativity and romance as well. But it's in that square to the 8th. And then we've got the moon in a fire sign. So the moon is ruled by Mars, Aries moon. So it's the Aries moon is wanting to find out about itself and initiate and learn about itself. But the moon usually is about lunar things and more internal and reflective. But in Aries, that Martian energy of wanting to go out and find out and initiate and take action. So there's an inherent like tension and contradiction there with an Aries moon anyway. And we're seeing it applying to Chiron. And Chiron is the wounded healer. So whenever the moon is applying to a planet, there's like an energy there of something that's happening. And it's in this 6th house, again, which relates to the 10th of your daily routine. Our teacher calls it the chop wood, carry water, what you're doing in your daily routines. So there's an energy there that the moon can often represent the environment. So the moon is out of sect, as Krista was saying about the sun being in sect. The moon is the opposite now because it's below the horizon. So it's out of sect, which means it's struggling a little bit with that environment, but also we see it applying to Chiron. So there's a wound there that's needing to be addressed by that moon that's wanting to take action all the time. But when it does, that wound is triggered and shown, I would imagine, for this individual, that these issues come up that need to keep being faced. And with Chiron, we quite often see that they can't actually be resolved, but how they can be. We talk about creating a healthy container for Chiron and for other planets. And with Chiron, it can be a case of being able to reach out and help others through your own experience, rather than trying to resolve it for yourself. And that's the way to really work with Chiron, and to maybe help that moon, and the way to take action, particularly in the daily activities, in the way that the individual does work. Because the moon at 14 degrees is like quite close to that Mars. I mean, Mars can't see Cancer. Where was I going with that? Oh, I'm thinking of Mercury. Can't see the sun. It has no line of sight to the sun, so the sun is struggling, but Mars can see the moon. It's got quite a nice relationship. So I would say that's an area for the individual to focus on in the daily routines.
I can talk some more too about Jupiter. Is everyone still there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, it got quiet. Yeah, so second house, like Sonia said, is Sagittarius, so it's ruled by Jupiter, hanging out in the 5th house in Pisces. So Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces as well. So we would say Jupiter's in domicile over there. So that's a good thing. That's, Jupiter's at home there. They can do what they want there. They can act like Jupiter, and they don't have to like follow some other rules of a different planet. So that's really like a positive sign to see as far as the ruler of the second house that we would associate with an individual's resources, finances, assets. Like, I always like to make clear to people when I'm doing a reading that the second house can speak to like any skills that you might possess, or anything that's like a tool or a resource for you, whether that's material or not so material. It's interesting that we have Neptune in the second house. I feel like it doesn't negate what's going on with the Jupiter situation, but it definitely like adds this layer of haze or fog to the finances. So I wonder, or resources, I wonder about maybe it being like a winding path to to feeling well resourced, or if it's a little bit of an unclear, it makes things unclear, I guess. And then I wonder, potentially another signification of Neptune being like kind of magical in a way, and that it can see Jupiter from there, with the applying square. They definitely have like some sort of relationship. So yeah, I think Jupiter being in the 5th house brings this like buoyancy and like optimism, and like lightheartedness. So yeah, I'd wonder about those resources coming from the individual's creativity, being that the 5th house, the significations of the 5th house are creativity, hobbies, anything that brings you pleasure. Children could be another one. But yeah, so, and then we also see that Jupiter is applying a square to the sun in the 8th house in Gemini. So despite the sun being in like this dark house, we have Jupiter kind of like bringing in a little bit of that optimism and buoyancy and like beneficial things, being that it is the greater benefic and the benefic of sect. That seems like a really promising thing there, tied to the client's career, I would say. That like there's kind of like this underlying like good foundation for that. What else? Losing my train of thought. Oh, I wondered too about this person with their sun being ruled by Mercury in the 9th house, like if there's like a teaching element to what they do, or if that's like, or it could be like communication or something too, but being that Mercury's in the 9th house, that I would associate with like teachers and learning and higher education. I'd wonder if this person is, if that's like a potential career path, or has been something that they've done, or like an underlying motivator maybe for what they'd like to be doing. Yeah, those are some of my thoughts on that.
I'm hoping I can make sense of this too, what I'm going to say anyway. But I keep going back to the sun in the 8th, and then you've got Mars up in Leo at the MC. We do a lot with whole sign houses as opposed to only degree based aspects in Hellenistic. And the sextile is a really nice, it's a friendly aspect. So, the Mars up there in Leo in that whole sign house aspect to the sun, I wonder if they are, the two are tied together, obviously, because of the houses. If they're dealing with other people's money, other people's, not just finances, but belongings, being the opposite to the second. And then Venus in Taurus in the 7th, that's a lot of personal relationships, like one-on-one. That can also be business. So I wonder what this person actually does for a career. Janessa just mentioned Mercury there in the 9th being a lot of, the possibility of being a teacher, something like that. But communication could be really, really heavy within that career itself. But I also just keep thinking, this person's like behind the scenes, maybe. Mars is trining the moon. That just kind of undercover behind the scenes. But Leo at the midheaven, it's going to make their face kind of prominent and maybe recognizable. Does anyone have any idea what this person does for a living?
Yeah, I know. And the question came with, so this person recently had a career change last year. And so this is a completely new field that they're entering in. And so I guess my question to the group would be, where do you see a shift in career, or a shift in the success of a career just in a chart? Like, would you look at the nodes applying to the career house or the money house? Would you see it in perfections, or would you see it in a solar return? I mean, this person is a Gemini sun, and the next big things to come through Gemini is Jupiter this year. But also Pluto in Libra is going to be kind of transforming. Pluto in Aquarius is going to be transforming the 8th and the 12th house, just because by the trine nature of when a planet is in an element, it trines the other elemental houses. So Pluto down here in the 4th, the next 20 years is going to be kind of shifting this house, these other people resources, and this 12th house over here. Do you guys want me to tell you what this person does for a living? They are in real estate now, and it's been a complete 180 from what they have done before. And so when you say other people's money, that is real estate, right? That is dealing with other people, helping other people find their home. And so within real estate, that's kind of what they're like asking about, like what sort of transformation will this new career bring? Because it's a lot of work that goes unpaid up front, hopefully planting those seeds that come to fruit later on.
Are we able to see the progress moon phase, so we get an idea of where they are in the career path?
Yeah, let me stop share, and then I will pull that chart up. While I do that, do we want to just talk just generally about sect? That this chart and the sect will be kind of the last thing, just so that we can start to wrap up a little bit. I'm going to go on mute, but does that work?
Yeah, so there is a slide that Crystal will show when we get to it, but we were hoping to show you like how you could pull your own chart up, and hopefully we'll get time when we finish this and Crystal will just take you quickly through how to actually pull your own chart up. And we've got a slide which you can maybe take a screenshot of, and it will show you how to look for the sun, the little glyph of the sun, the circle with the dot in the middle, and just to identify whether it's in that top half of the chart, as you can see here with the sun, and look for those pieces of pi, and you can see there it's in the 9th, but also look for this line that goes across the middle. It usually runs through the 1st to the 7th house, and this line represents the horizon, and that would be on the day that you were born. And basically, if the sun's above that horizon, that would indicate it's daylight. So it's as the sun rises above the horizon and then it sets. So we know that it is daylight during that time. And once the sun is set, it's traveling below the earth. So basically, you're identifying where your sun is in the sky. So you're looking for that little glyph of the sun, drawing that imaginary line. And if it's above that line, so it's usually from houses 1 through to 7 to be above, counting backwards, or 7 through to 12 counting forwards, or if it's below the line, it would be houses 1 through to 7 counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and below the line, and that would indicate that it's a night chart. And if you're a night chart, then that would mean that you're ruled by the moon, that the moon is your sect leader, and that tells us different things about your personality, and it also tells us what planets are cooperating with the moon and are stronger in your chart, speaking louder. So that's what we were talking about when we were talking about Mars being in the 10th, because it's out of sect, it's ruled by the moon, it's in sect with the moon, and so is Venus in this chart, whereas that domiciled Jupiter that was in the 5th is insect, it's part of the sun's team. So there's like 2 teams, a lunar team and a solar team. So that's a Hellenistic concept. That's one of the first concepts that we learned. And it was really interesting actually, because that kind of blew my mind, because lunar people, Shauna and I are both lunar, and we tend to experience things more internally, so we can be more reflective, and like maybe like if I've got a big problem, I don't always share it straight away. I'll process it for a couple of days before I maybe speak out about it. And I've noticed the same about Shauna. Whereas solar people will take action. That's the way they'll deal with things. And maybe Krista and Janessa might share more about their experiences with being a solar chart person. But we're hoping to empower you to maybe look up in your own charts what type of chart you are and see if that resonates for you as well. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, and really quickly, I can just show people how to do that. So I'm going to open up a new. So Astro-Seek is a free website made by a man who probably never sleeps. So it's a free website. You can put in your data. You can go right here, enter in your information. I created just a person. I made a person so that we could pull up their chart. And so I'm going to hide the aspect lines just because they're distracting at this point. So this is just, I entered in this made up person's date of birth and where they were born, just to kind of give an example of how you would find sect in a chart. And again, it's just splitting, it's creating a binary of day sect, whether the sun is your luminary. There's 2 luminaries, the sun and the moon, your luminary of sect. And so this person was born at night. So their sun here, this is the glyph of the sun, is below this line here. So you'll see ASC, that stands for the ascendant. This is the eastern horizon. This is where the sun was ascending. This is the descendant. This is the western horizon. This is where the sun sets. This person was born at night. The sun had set, it had moved this way. And so this person is of the night sect. So the moon is their luminary in charge. So the team of the moon are, it's the moon, it is Mars, and it is Venus. So both sects have a malefic. Malefics are Saturn and Mars, and they both have a benefic. The benefics are Jupiter and Venus. And so this made-up person here has the Sun and Jupiter, which are the day sect, kind of conjunct, which I thought was pretty funny. That was just this made-up person. So this person is a night sect. Their luminary is 0 degree moon in Virgo in the 12th house. It is co-present with the malefic contrary to sect, Saturn in the 12th, in Mercury's temple of Virgo. So it's just a way to kind of identify it in your own chart of, okay, where's your sun in relation to this horizon line? And then where are the two teammates to either the sun or the moon, depending on whether you're born at night during the day. Now, some people might have a chart where the ascendant line is here and the sun is just below it or just above it. And so it's important to kind of verify that your birth time is correct or as correct as it can be. It speaks to just the quality of light that was at the moment of your birth. And so if you were born with the ascendant very close to your sun, then it can make all the difference of, what are the harder planets and what are the more helpful planets in a chart, and using a qualified astrologer to kind of help navigate the nuance of that. You might, it's everything. There's no rules. There's tools that you use, right? And so if you have the sun very close to the ascendant line, and you also have Mars here in the first, it might be that Mars is very energizing and is not harmful. It might be that Mars is more harmful to your body, like that maybe you're accident prone, or you're too eager to get into arguments, or you're too whatever. It's using an astrologer to kind of expand that and kind of see so that you can utilize a little bit more. Just helps give some compassion to your natural impulses, and helps you have understanding of your it's called the natal promise, but it's not set in stone. It's just having a compassionate understanding for your whole chart. So there's definitely nuance, especially if the luminary, the sun, is near the horizon line. Most people it's going to be pretty clear, like this person, it's definitely at night. The sun has definitely set, and the moon is on the other end of that. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so I'm gonna, I pulled up the anonymous person's secondary progressions because Sonia asked if you want to look at that real quick, and then we can wrap up, answer any questions, and kind of just give again a little shout out to what each of our practices names are. If that works, I will pull out the secondary progressions, which I thought was interesting because Pluto, as I mentioned first, is right on this person's MC. Pluto just ingressed into the nativity's 4th house, but in the secondary progressions, it's taken a while to get here. Obviously, the moon is in the 3rd here in Aquarius, so it's kind of on its way to having that return. But if anybody wants to comment on the secondary progressions before we wrap up, I'll mute real quick.
Yeah, we're seeing a full moon, aren't we? So that's interesting. That's showing, that it's on the right path. I can't. Is it flowing forth? I'm having trouble seeing the degrees because it's a little small. So the moon is at 14 and the sun's at 10. So yeah, the moon has just gone past. We see that the nodes are right on that ascendant and descendant in the progress chart as well, in the 1st and 7th. And we talked about how that was important for you, Krista, and that was also the 1st and 7th that I highlighted as the eclipse time for me. So sometimes the progress chart can speak so loudly in terms of the nodes, and we see Pluto here right on the angle as well. And that was the case for me with the astrology story. Pluto was there. It just really does seem to speak of being in the right path. That full moon thing, that the course correction happened at that quarter moon. Now she's on the full moon stage of this is what it is. And there may be a course correction when she gets to the last quarter moon. She may have some minor adjustments, but she's in the right forest and she's on the right path, you know. So yeah, you know, it looks good from what I can see in the progressions. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I also really like that the MC is shifted to the 11th. I mean, it's, you know, opening up groups of people, and that just feels really good for real estate alone. The other thing that keeps catching my eye is in her natal and in the progressions, Saturn. In the natal, it was in the 9th, but it's now with Venus. And I know Saturn sometimes gets a bad rap, but I just literally keep thinking of the word lots. And how perfect is that for real estate? Yeah.
And of course, he's a malefic sex, so he's going to be working in her favor, you know. So to see him in that house where, like we said, is about other people's money, other people's property, land, you know, make.
Well, just to bring it up, you know, I have Antisha radar, and so she has Antisha Sun, Saturn Sun Antisha in her chart.
And for those who don't know, Antisha and Contra, Antisha is like a secret conjunction. I don't know if we went over that before, but it's like they're working together, you know, in secret, which again, behind the scenes, that works really nice for her.
Well, sorry to jump all around, but I think that we've kind of come to a nice end. We're just under 2 hours. Thank you for everybody that's tuned in. And I will just thank everybody for all the work that got up to this point, especially to Sonia, because she really carried the weight of this whole event and is hosting it on her YouTube. And my name is Krista. On the internet, I go by Practical Astro, so you can find me on Instagram and Twitter and practicalastros.com. I'm building a Substack to kind of play with my Mercury project a little bit more with writing. And I do natal readings, I do solar return readings, I do tarot, and that's just a little bit about me. I will pass it to Shauna. And I'm going to mute real quick, and I'll come back to this slide.
So online, you can find me at Figures of Heaven on Instagram and Threads. I have a Twitter. It's a little less active. It's at It's Internal. I don't have my calendar set up quite yet. So if you're interested in a reading or session, you can just DM me. Email is figuresofheaven@gmail.com. Yeah, so I'll throw it over to Janessa.
Thanks, Shauna. Yeah, I'm on Instagram as By Jove Astrology, By Jove Astrology. Sometimes I have to use By Jove Astro if it's already taken. And then I'm on Twitter at the same. And then my website's probably the most useful, and that's byjoveastrology.com. I do offer different types of readings, natal chart, solar return, year ahead readings. And also we can look at, like, we can do some shorter, smaller, more focused readings if that's something you're interested in. But yeah, check out my website. I've got some cool stuff going on over there.
And I'm Sonia. Thank you for finding me on my YouTube channel. We're hoping in time that we can migrate these meetings to the Ask the AsteriSofiaKairos channel. But for now, it's here. So thank you for joining us. You can find me at Celestia Astrology, and that's either on YouTube or Twitter or Instagram. And my website is celestiaastrology.com. And I also integrate the mindfulness. That's very important to me. It's a daily habit for me. And I've found that it goes really nicely with astrology. So I make Astro Mindfulness, which I use personally to align with the astrology of the moment for the full and the new moons. So I offer those to you freely on my channel. And I also do astro coaching, which I find has like really good results, where you can just go that little bit deeper into the astrology and get really practical results by working with what your chart is showing at the moment and identifying your goals. And some people I've spoken to about think sometimes it's about the coach telling you what to do, and they're like, oh, I'm not ready to be told what to do. It's like, no, it's working with where you are now, what the astrology says about where you are now and about where you want to go, and we move at your pace, you know, with whatever blocks you've got coming up for you. And we look at how, and we work together, you know, how could you remove those barriers, working with the astrology as well. So if Mars is being a problem, we'll brainstorm ways around it. So that's how I love to work, and that's how I love to use astrology as well as a tool for you in your life, and really see how it can be used practically as well for like really lasting results in your life. It's really exciting to use it that way. So yeah, just in summing up, I hope you've enjoyed like the personal stories here, that something we've shared has been useful to you or struck a chord. I hope you've enjoyed seeing like our different styles as well, how our astrology speaks through the way that we're meeting you and how we're presenting ourselves. I find it fascinating. Well, I mean, basically as astrologers, we all find everything fascinating and everything gets linked back to the astrology. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Find us at Ask as well. We've got a Twitter and Instagram. You can ask Kairos. Our Gmail address is on the thumbnail, and also our offer as well. Don't forget our giveaway is a 30-minute reading with Shauna, and she's offering that. We'll be announcing the winner. If you signed up, please do let us know you subscribed. Send a message on our Instagram or on our Twitter. We haven't got a Facebook yet, but do contact us through any of those, or email youcanaskKairos@gmail.com, just to let us know that you've subscribed, and we'll know then to enter you into the draw. And all four of us are offering 25% off readings. So contact us through the details that we've given, and we'll let you know how to book up with us. The code will be Valentine's, because that's our theme for tonight, that our alternative Valentine is, of course, astrology, because that's our shared love. So has anybody else got something?
No, just thanks everybody.
Okay, I'm going to say goodbye then. Thank you for you. Please join our community, join Ask.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.